Welcome back, everybody, to Two Guys and a Stack of Comics. My name is Reed. Along with me, as always, is Mike. Mike, we are nearing the end of 2024, man. It has been a
I can't believe it. I can't believe
crazy,
it.
crazy that it's that close. A very depressing week last week. I had the Bears lose on a Hail Mary, which almost broke me on Sunday. But we are gonna power through here as we get to the end of the year. You and I have done a couple of videos this year. We've talked about how to fix modern comic books. We talked about DC Comics in particular as well. Before the year ended, though, you and I, because we really like these conceptual things of how we fix it, and it's always fun for us to see what you guys in the comments think below as well. Wanted to look at how would we tackle probably the biggest issue that me and you think is hurting comic books right now, and not necessarily, it doesn't even come in the comic book realm. It is the MCU. It is the MCU being broken. It is the MCU going from this absolute peak number one thing that had all these comic book characters in the media in such a positive light to where now, I mean, I'll be honest, comic book movies are kind of an embarrassment at this
Yeah,
point. You
really?
look at how they're doing. I mean, was it Joker lost 200 million? The Venom looks like that one bombed, and the MCU has probably been the biggest defender in that the last couple years there have been so many misfires. So we're going to talk a little bit about where we thought that went wrong, and then how we would try to fix it. And again, we're going to go over this and at the angle of if we were put in a position where you got to try to fix it, not it's broken beyond repair, we got to give up on it, superhero movies are dead kind of thing. I know there's a lot of people have that opinion. We're just going to conceptually look at this. If we were put in charge and they said fix this, what would we try to do? Before we get to fixing it, Mike, when did the MCU go wrong for you? When did it start going to where you were like, oh man, we're in trouble? Do you remember a certain movie or a certain point, or where'd that hit
Love
for you?
and Thunder.
Thor, Love and Thunder? Okay.
I was like, what the heck is going on here? That was, eh, man, and that's my favorite Marvel character is
Yeah.
Thor. And I
Do you think
was
it was
just
just the quality of Love and Thunder that made you feel that way? Was it the storytelling, the tone? Like, was there just overall because the movie was awful, or was there anything in particular, like just everything?
check, check, check all the boxes. I was, and we talked about this on another video. It's such a cool story to tell, and the way they told it, I was just, it's like they took the plot and gave it to somebody who was half a rom-com. I don't know who wrote it, but
It's Taika Waititi. Yeah, it is Taika Waititi.
does he write romantic comedies?
No, he's a very out there kind of comedian. I mean, he did Ragnarok, and that worked well. Love and Thunder, yeah, I think that was. I think
I
Love and
think
Thunder.
I would have to say I think what they did is they had some inklings of some of what happened in Ragnarok that
Mhm.
worked, and they mistakenly said, "Oh, let's take that up another couple notches." Kind of like the mistake with the Flash movie. Like, what would make this Flash movie better? Oh, we need more of
A double dose of Barry Allen.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
no, and it didn't work, and it was just I just
yeah.
remember
I think
especially that scene with them at the end, and there I don't know. It was a disaster for me as a Thor fan. I was
Yeah,
like,
I think Love
what's
and
happening?
Thunder, I think that was the movie that was the biggest wake up call to like, oh man, that they're in trouble overall. Because what was interesting was, Black Widow wasn't very good, but I never thought it was gonna be because the character was dead already. And you're like, this is ridiculous. Why are we doing a prequel? The Eternals and Shang-Chi, they didn't work for me. And it's honestly, those are just characters that have never really translated to a ton of success in the comic books either. And so, of course, bringing movies
Oh
and then
yeah.
let alone movies that aren't even faithful to the source material. Um, Thor was the one that I thought, like, this is the slam dunk one that should work, right? We've got Hemsworth. We love this character. He's one of the only old guard mainstays Avengers. And it was probably the worst movie that the MCU's had in terms of, I think they've probably been surpassed since with, I don't know if it's still the worst movie in the MCU, but it was really bad. I think if we look at where the MCU went wrong before we get into fixing it, I think there's three key things that have happened. And I think people kind of expound on these in different ways and take it different ways, but I think there's three different things that I think happened. I think first and foremost, the biggest single reason that the MCU failed, they got away from the comic books. And the MCU always changed the comic books a little bit. But the biggest thing they started doing is, when you look at like the early phases of what worked, yes, the Infinity Gauntlet in the comic book story is a lot different than the one that's in the movies, obviously, right? You don't have Adam Warlock, you don't have Silver Surfer. There's a lot of, characters who don't play a role in the movie that were huge in the comic book. But the overall plot of Thanos gets the gauntlet, tries to wipe out half the population. There's enough there that you can go, okay, inspired by the comic books, right? I think
You
the
could
same
roll with
thing.
it. You
Yeah,
could roll
even
with
Age of
that.
Ultron, right? No Hank Pym involved in that, but you substitute Tony Stark, it's still Ultron, and Avenger creates one of their own worst enemies. You can look and go, hey, they changed some things, but it fits. I think when you start looking at what they did after Endgame, which is where I think even in Endgame things started going wrong. But I think once you got to the Black Widow movie, that start of phase four, I think it was, they just decided we're done with the comic books. We're just throwing whatever we want. These are going to be these characters in name only. If you watch the Shang-Chi movie, it has nothing to do with the Master of Kung Fu comic books that were out in the 70s. I mean, in the comics, that was a very more grounded comic book. He was a spy. He kind of had like a James Bond rival peer that he worked with.
Right?
He was a very cool character. They tossed all that aside and did this very fantastical world of mystical thing, and it came off as weird. I think you can look at like the Marvels. There is no team called the Marvels. There's really no partnership between those three characters. The Eternals had nothing to do with the Eternals from the comic books, down to Icarus, the main character, being turned into a villain. They kind of just started taking. I think what you really saw at Phase 4 is it was the Hollywood takeover of, okay, we're a little annoyed with your stupid little funny books that you people think are important. We're the experts. We're the storytellers. We'll take it
Yes.
from here. And I think it drove it off a cliff because I don't think Hollywood ever understood why the MCU was successful. It was
No, it made no
successful.
sense to them. And
Yeah,
it's so weird because Hollywood, came a courting to San Diego Comic Con, and billions of dollars were rolling in, and they just I don't think they understood, but the passion was there from all the moviegoers and the fans, and they rode the coattails all the way to the
all
bank.
those great comic creators from the 60s,
And
70s, and 80s. Yeah.
yeah, and they just, and then they were like, okay. And when did Disney buy Marvel?
I know it was sometime. I mean, they bought him. I think it was right before the first Avengers movie is when they
Yeah,
bought him. But the thing is, I think what happened is it was the Hollywood takeover and Disney fully took over at that point because there always seemed like there was a plan that Kevin Feige had prior to Disney even being
a
involved.
real fan.
And that it was like Thanos shows up in the end credits. You kind of knew this was all leading to the Infinity Gauntlet eventually. And I'm sure Disney stepped in and made them do some things. I think what you started to see is it was like the roadmap is no longer there. And that's where you get so many back, like Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania. There's no movie of Ant-Man and the Wasp fighting Kang in the quantum realm. They just
Right.
started making stuff up, and it's because I think they started to abandon the comic book storylines because these Hollywood writers started thinking, we know better. You guys and your little funny comic books that you think can do this, let us take
Can't
over and
write
show
us
you how a
films.
real movie is written. And I
Yeah.
think that was the first step. I think, secondly, what happened wrong was I think Marvel went from telling us the stories that they knew the audiences wanted to see, and they started telling us, no, these are the movies you need to see. And I think that's the problem that happened is when you look at the original films, right? Captain America's movies all felt very real to Captain America. They were very based on comic book storylines that people loved. The Winter Soldier, even Civil War, you're recreating panels from the Mark Millar and Steve McNiven comic book. You had so much stuff that was in there. Even a character like Iron Man, where you can go, okay, they kind of changed him a little bit. You still had pieces of like the Extremis comic book run that I think was Warren Ellis who wrote that. So you were still pulling things into these movies. When you got later in, they just started deciding that, like, you know what, you need to see a movie about the Eternals, but the comic book Eternals aren't what we want. We need to give you the more real world, updated Hollywood version of this. And it was, again, it's a movie no one was asking for, with a comic book no one was reading, with a team nobody wanted to see, that didn't even fit in the storyline of Marvel. And you can tell there was just an effort of, nope, this is a movie you need to see. Instead of going to the movies that right off of Endgame, I mean, I think the thing is, if right out of Endgame you'd have done a movie with the new Avengers team, of the remnants of who's left, of who's going to pick up the legacy for Tony and Steve, with these characters that we like Strange and Spider-Man and Falcon and War Machine and all these characters who are left, that would have been really interesting. Instead, it was like, nope, you need new characters, you need this. And there's going to be people who say it was done because of diversity or done because of whatever reason. You can put whatever reason behind it that you want. I think the bottom line is, instead of giving fans what they wanted, which when they did, it ended up being successful. I mean, you look at the movies that Marvel succeeded on. Geez, a Spider-Man movie with all the Spider-Man. That's
Yeah.
successful. The Doctor Strange movie, well, I think that was awful. It was still a sequel to Doctor Strange, and that made like $900 million. You look at Deadpool and Wolverine. Geez, people like Deadpool and Wolverine. It makes $1
Right.
billion. And I think that's the thing that Marvel stopped doing is they got away from the comics and then they started making the movies they wanted to make instead of
And
the fans wanted them to make. And
and
I
the
think that threw them off
hubris,
track.
I think the hubris, and what's really interesting to me is most of those millions and millions of dollars were spent by comic fan adjacent folks.
Yep.
And I think Disney was going with that premise. Well, these folks don't know about the comics. They'll like what I give them. But the reality was something different. And I find that really interesting, is like these comic adjacent folks didn't like the
What they did
stuff that
either.
they were putting
Yeah,
out.
it's kind
And
of like
of
Marvel
course,
threw the baby out with the bathwater.
the true fans didn't like it. So it's no wonder the ticket sales plummeted. But it just speaks to how powerful the source material is, and the closer you stay to it, the better off you're going to be.
Yeah, I think lastly, and this is the last thing we'll get before we the actual fixes. I think the biggest thing they lost, and this is where I think the TV shows and the movies killed it because there was no longer a plot that was going forward. I think the thing is when you look at the first 20 something films, one of the reasons, I mean, me and you used to talk about this all the time before we had the YouTube channel. Sometimes we'd be going to see a movie and like we're more DC Comics guys. We'd be going to see like I think we used to be that part of that comic group that used to go see these movies together. Sometimes we'd be
Right.
like an Ant-Man movie and we're like, I don't really know if I would see this one, but I don't want to miss a chapter of the MCU story. So I'm
Right.
gonna go catch this in theaters. And that
Yeah.
was the huge thing they had is you felt like with every one of these movies, you didn't want to miss it while it was in theaters because it was all part of this continuing narrative. It was kind of like you had a chapter book, right? A novel, and you didn't want to miss a chapter because you were worried, like, well, when we get to the final chapter, if I skipped chapter 21, is that going to mess up the ending for me? And
Yeah.
stupidly, Marvel decided, you know what, we don't need to do that anymore. We don't need to do long-term storytelling. We can just give you as much content as you want whenever you want. It has nothing to do with each other anymore. And
And
I think that kind of threw it offline.
we can try and take a TV plot and string it into a movie plot. And so you'll have to see the movie so you can stay up with the TV. I think they're just grasping at straws right now. And, that they've had these thin tendrils of plots thrown out there post Endgame to try and weave that magic web again, but it's totally gone.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's totally gone. You're
Yep.
absolutely right about the first 20 movies or so. They all had solid, branches that led from one story to the other, and that kind of dissolved. And you can see these little thinly veiled, tendrils,
But yeah,
across
it's
from the
not enough to make
TV to
anybody feel
this
like you got to
movie
watch it.
and back again to try and say, oh, they all connected. No, it's not one machine, it's not one mind anymore. It's all blah.
Yep. So we get to that's what broke it. Now we get to the part that we go to. We got to fix it. We get put in charge. How do we fix it? I think one of the things that's troublesome for Marvel, where it's harder to fix the MCU, they have so many things that are already done. There are so many TV series that are already filmed that they're going to publish anyway. You don't know what those storylines are going to be. We know Downey's coming back as Doctor Doom. We know there's this whole multiverse thing. So if I was put in charge of the MCU, and I'll kind of give a couple steps I would do, and then we'll go to where you'd go. The
Okay.
first thing that I would do, I think the Doctor Doom storyline, what I would have them do is I would have Doctor Doom come down and he basically wipes out the MCU as it is. All these characters that we hadn't like, I would just have Doom wipe them all out. I would have the opening to the Doom Avengers movie basically be that Doom comes in and all these Miss Marvel, Shang-Chi, the Eternals, all these characters that audiences have rejected, Doom just takes them over. You don't have to kill them off, but Doom captures them, imprisons them, defeats them. And I would
Kind of
have
like
a
in
very,
the ultimate universe.
yeah, just have that
Different
Doom
way to
comes in and wipes the floor with these people. I think, and then you can kind of resolve, and somehow with the Doom storyline, all I would end up with is at the end of this Doctor Doom storyline, the multiverse is reset, and we are back at a starting point. Because I think the number one thing that they have to do, you got to recast Iron Man, you got to recast Captain America, you got to recast Black Widow, you got to recast the Hulk, and you got to recast all of your main Avengers. Marvel, to me, made the huge mistake of they've underestimated how much of the audience investment was in Tony Stark and Steve Rogers, and those two characters and their place in that universe, and every other character was kind of important based on their relationship to Steve and Tony. And when they got rid of that, they never found a way to replace that. So to me, I think you can easily recast these characters. And that, look, Sean Connery is James Bond, in my opinion. Bond's been recast 6 times. The franchise is fine. We have had Superman has been recast how many times? Christian Bale was beloved as Batman. He's been recast. The Pattinson movies are doing fine. People loved Michael Keaton. He got recast. The movies did fine. Almost every iconic character gets recast. Spider-Man's the greatest evidence of it. How much people love Tobey Maguire? Then Garfield came and then Tom Holland. Now they're all great in the role. I think the thing is, if Downey and Evans and these guys don't want to come back, you can't throw out Iron Man. You can't throw out Cap. You can't afford it. And the
No.
biggest thing is Marvel overestimated their depth because their comic books are so successful. They thought, hey, we've got 50 characters who could lead a movie. It's like, not really. You've got maybe 10, and you threw away so many of them in Endgame. So to me, the number one thing I would do, I think the Doom thing has to lead to a reset. I don't care how you get there. Just at the end, Reed Richards or whoever, very much similar to the 2015 comic books, Reed Richards helps reset it. And we start anew with all of our characters recast with you. And look, you may take some little losses along the way. People will probably complain, oh, it's not Downey Jr. If Heath Ledger can be replaced as the Joker and we accept that and another guy wins an Academy Award, if Sean Connery can be recast, you can recast Iron Man. You just have to actually go through it. That would be my first step: is go to a complete reset and recast. Well, what do you think about that portion of it?
I think it's, I think they're stuck in their own morass, and I don't know that they'll be bold enough to do that because then you got the bean counters going, well, we just need to recapture the original formula. And they won't like this, they won't like that. But I do agree with you. I think it's necessary because you got to get, Thor, Iron Man, Hulk, and everybody back. You got to. And, and Spider-Man's forever with Sony, so you can't bring him in. I think you start small. And
Mm-hmm.
when I mean small, I don't mean like, you know, teeny tiny, but like what they did with Iron Man. Let's
Yep. One
try,
movie.
yeah, just try one movie. We'll bring it, with a great character that you all love. You might have to recast him because Robert Downey Jr.'s Doctor Doom now, but why not, start fresh and start with Iron Man. And then when that movie is strong and it's a standalone, because the part of the magic that they created there, you alluded to it, is that they built slowly those first few years. What year did Iron Man come out?
I think it was
2000,
2008 that one started.
2008. Yeah. And, it was a standalone movie. You make one good movie, standalone movie, bring back one of the iconic characters. Maybe it's Captain America, maybe, whoever it is. Maybe it's Iron Man recast. You'd have to pick a heavyweight to recast either Iron Man or Captain America, but it could be done. And
Yeah.
then
No, we've seen
bring us
classic
that
characters
good,
cast before.
yeah, bring us back that good fun. Maybe get a summer thing and don't announce all these plans that are, bound to get shot down or crumble to ashes. And don't start trying to build some big end game plot from the start. You start with the one movie and build from there like you did before. But yeah, you got to have those original heavyweight characters back.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right.
There's too much brand recognition. It's kind of like if DC had decided after Christian Bale was done, we're not doing any more Batman. Like, no,
Are you
you
kidding
can't
me?
do that. You can't
Yeah.
afford that. And that's the thing is Iron Man is such a big brand with so many people to just
Look
go,
at
the
Toby
Iron Man
Maguire.
Tony Stark branch is dead.
Look at Toby Maguire. He's been recast three or
Yeah.
four times now. So
Well, and the
yeah.
whole thing is recasting means you can do the nostalgia bait movie if Downey Jr. ever decides to come back and have the two Tony Starks face off,
And
right?
you know who would be great um, to do again would be Black Panther.
Yeah,
It
no,
would
I
be
think T'Challa,
so
I think
cool.
that was another one. I think
Um,
I
you got to
understand
bring,
why you got to
yeah,
bring him back. You got to bring back
you
T'Challa.
got to bring him back. T'Challa is like, you got to bring him back. I mean, I know Boseman has passed, but he wouldn't want you not making Black Panther movies because he knows how important that character is to everybody.
Yep. No, for sure. I think recasting would be my first step. So I would do a total reboot of it. This Secret Wars thing ends with the universe starting anew. I think the second thing is when you set this universe up now because you have all of your characters in play, you can start to actually establish a Marvel universe. I think one of the biggest things they were always going to struggle with, and this may be why they've delayed it, the X-Men make no sense in the current MCU, and so you have to reboot. The biggest reason being in a universe where Thanos has already come down and tried to conquer the universe, having where people are all of a sudden afraid of Wolverine and Nightcrawler because they're mutants makes no sense. This
Right.
Earth has seen a purple alien come down and wipe out half of everybody. So they're
Yeah.
not going to be super freaked out by mutants.
Yeah.
Mutants need to be baked into the beginning of the MCU where they start off feared. And you can't just insert them into the story. To me, the other reason that the mutants being put in, and I think kind of having the X-Men there from the beginning, is the biggest problem the MCU had, and I think this was where they fell apart a bit too. They wanted to interject the real world into the MCU. It does not belong there. And the thing is, like they wanted to do some of these stories of like Sam Wilson struggling to be Captain America because of racial disparities that have happened in the past and inequality. And look, you can tell a story like that, I'm sure, but that's not why we go to the MCU movies. It may mean something to some people, but the biggest reason the MCU worked, it was shut off your brain, popcorn entertainment that didn't hit on heavy subjects. And the thing is, you can tell that story, but the comic book movies that are intended for families and general audiences, you either have to be a really adept filmmaker who is so good that you can weave that in and people go, wow, that really connects, or you can't do it. And what Marvel has shown in these last 5 years is their attempts to try to weave political stuff or real world stuff into it or social issues into it, they failed. They failed spectacularly. And I'm sure there's some people who watched them and it really hit with them, and good for you if it did. But from a wide general audience standpoint, what you have seen the general audience tell Marvel is, we don't want the real world here. This is, if I want the real world, I will go turn on the news or I will walk outside of my house. You need to set up a Marvel universe that feels like a different universe. It transports
Right.
you somewhere else. And that's where having mutants there from the beginning and, okay, here's the rules of this universe could really help. Because I think it was always going to be so hard to just bring the X-Men into this universe because it doesn't make any sense with the past, especially like how do you bring Logan into the MCU? Like he's been alive for like 200 years. He would have just sat and had a lunch break through all of Thanos and all these other things. Same thing with Xavier, Magneto, all these characters. And so I think they've got to get back to
Reboot, reset.
reboot, reset, and go with a fantastical tone. That's what we loved Marvel. It was stuff that I think it was what Ian Fleming always said with his James Bond things. He wanted stuff that was impractical but not improbable, is what he wanted. And I think that's the thing that
Yeah.
Marvel had is Marvel established certain rules that kind of made sense within their universe. And you knew it wasn't reality, but you could at least kind of place everybody and go, okay, this guy can do this because of these powers. What Marvel
Yeah.
started doing is they wanted to bring real world stuff in, but then they wanted to give all these characters like random abilities that were just way overpowered. And it's like
Yeah.
you can't do that. You got to get back and you got to bring it back where it feels a little bit like the Marvel universe where everybody's got their certain place. I think the third part, and this would be the most important thing that I would do with Marvel. Disney Plus is dead. No more Disney Plus shows. No more TV shows.
Yeah.
Every single character is a movie. Because I think what they did more than anything else, once you started doing Disney Plus, and I gotta do like homework to know what's going on in the movies, that's not what we came for. What used to be so great about Marvel, 2, 3 times a year you go to theaters, you see a light popcorn action film, you check in on what's going on in the MCU, and you're all caught up. And that was it. That was your commitment. Pretty much once in the summer, once in the late part of the summer, maybe once in the winter, you go see a movie. Normally it's decently produced, kind of fun. You laugh a little bit, you go home, maybe you forget it, but it's like, that was fun. When they started doing these 6-part Disney Plus series and all these things, people aren't watching this stuff weekly. And the numbers are there. It's not how it works. TV is a different audience. Netflix and all these, it's a different audience. When you want to do a movie, you got to make it worthy of the big screen. You got to make sure that it's something that feels epic. And I think to me, that's the number one thing I would do with every single character is as much as I love like the Daredevil TV show, no more TV shows for Daredevil. Daredevil gets a movie. Go do it. Go do a Daredevil movie. Go do a Punisher movie. Do these characters on the big screen. I think once Marvel decided we can go on the small screen and the big screen, it was inevitable that it was going to fall apart. And so I would have, if I was put in charge, every show that we have right now, if it's not finished, we're stopping development on it. We'll release whatever ones are out there, and hopefully they do well. There are no more TV shows happening, and everything is movies. I
You
think if
brought
you
up an
did that,
interesting point because Daredevil hasn't been on the big screen in a long time,
long time.
and we got
But
Charlie Cox.
if Charlie Cox wants to play him, great, and like bring him on the big screen. But I
Yeah.
think the thing is, where Marvel makes me mad is like, who made the determination that Daredevil is only a small screen character? You're telling me Ant-Man and Guardians of the Galaxy are worthy of a movie, but Daredevil, like, can't put that one out. Like, it
Hey,
doesn't make any sense.
I was saying that about the Flash before the Flash TV show came out. Why can't he get a movie?
No,
Right?
and I think that's the Flash is a good example of like the TV show kind of hurt the movie, I think, because people had seen so many TV show episodes of The Flash. It's kind of, oh, it's another Flash. Oh, it's not the same guy. And like, that's the thing is Marvel, I think when they started trying to do way too much at the same time, it took away what actually made it work. It's kind of like another Disney brand they mismanaged, Star Wars. I hate Star Wars being on television. The biggest reason I hate Star Wars being on TV, Star Wars should be epic. When you go
Yeah.
to Star Wars, when something's Star Wars, you should be in a theater. It should be
Yeah.
packed. You should have fans. You should see those blue letters a long time ago and it show up on the screen and that
Right.
opening crawl and the fan. That's what it should be. It shouldn't be at 2 a.m. on your bed watching it on your phone as it happens. That shouldn't be how that happens. And so I think that's the big things that I would do to fix the MCU is I think you could go
You're
in and
never gonna
got to
get this.
recast.
You're
Go
never
ahead,
gonna
Mike.
get Disney to give. You're never gonna get Disney to give up those TV. They're
But the
still
whole thing
trying to
is
recoup all their
your
losses.
your Disney Plus edition is the movies when they're done go on Disney Plus. And if you want to rewatch them endlessly, all of them go to Disney Plus. I think the Disney Plus content, there's not a single MCU show that's broken through where people are like, "Oh my gosh, that's incredible." Not really.
Yeah.
There was a few like when WandaVision came out, but I mean that was at the end of the pandemic where we were all just dying for something new to watch. All these shows since then, there's not a single one that's registered with people where it's like like on the same level as like the Avengers, right? Those Avengers scenes were like the circle of the team and all that. That's epic stuff that lives in pop culture forever. The
Yep.
TV stuff, no, there's no moment on any of these TV shows that anyone's like 5 years later going, "Oh, do you remember when that happened?" Because it's not the right format for it.
I
To me,
agree.
that's what I would do. I think you recast everybody, you do a complete reboot, you recast everybody, you bring back all your strong characters, you put a universe in that feels more like Marvel, where mutants and everybody are baked from the beginning, and then I think no more TV. That would be the best attempt that I could make at it. And like I think your great point you made, start slow, go back to 1 or 2 movies a year, slow the budgets down, have more character pieces. Because I think you brought up a great point with Iron Man. Part of the reason we liked Iron Man so much, that movie, he's only Iron Man, I believe, in that first movie in the Iron Man suit for like 15 minutes. The other 2 hours of that movie, he's Tony Stark. And that's what those
I
movies got.
know.
You have to love Tony Stark. You will
Yeah.
care about Iron Man, obviously, because he's cool, but you have to love Tony. And I think that they
Yeah.
get back to that, it could give them a chance to succeed. That would be what I would do. That would be what Mike would do. What would you guys do if you were put in charge tomorrow? You had to fix the MCU, not, obviously I know there's people are going to say it's done, it's over. If you were actually given that job and they told you, you have to fix this, here's your paycheck, what would you do? Would be interested to see what you guys think. What do you think about our suggestions? If you disagree with us, please let us know. It's always fun to see that. As always, folks, thank you guys for watching. God bless you, and we'll catch you in our next video.
Thank you, everybody.